Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the Magi, and thank you for joining me today as we take on the budget perspective of March of the Machines. Video came out yesterday, was covering all of the battles and the lesser known planes that are now being thrown around and mentioned on Arena. Of course, in coming videos, we're going to tackle jump in budget decks, the Mastery Pass, legendary brawlers that there's a lot of in this set, the top 3 limited archives that I'm recommending, and of course, Midweek Magic every single week. But before we get into all that, all these videos for the new sets, they take up an awful lot of time and have a very limited lifespan to be viewed. So do me a favor and hit that like button. It's what Mom would want you to do. Now, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, right. One of the first things I like to look at on any given new set coming out in Standard is the reprints. And this time I only spotted about 5, which is really pretty good. Reprints are important because, of course, if you are looking to build your collection, these can really get in the way. Some of these are actually kind of older Arena releases, so it could be 3-4 years before some of these would run into. Negate, of course, is currently in Standard, but an important card, particularly for the new players to get playsets of, because Mono Blue is a thing. So all in all, I don't think they did too bad on the reprints with the commons and uncommons. One area that I think they could have done a lot better is they reprinted the common gain land, dual land fixing land cycle. Man, these things have been printed so many times. I think this is like the 4th or 5th time they've been printed on Arena. And Wizards, if you're listening, you really need a shot of creativity here instead of just reprinting the same things over and over and over again. My advice is to try and avoid these unless they really help your deck. And by help, I mean allow you to splash a bomb or key removal. I would not generally use these in a on-color parity sort of thing. And hey, while we're talking about reprints, let's talk about the Multiverse Legends bonus sheet. You guys remember when bonus sheets were really unique and cool? Yeah, me either, because now they're like in every dang set. This one brings 65 cards into the mix. Of course, the trick here is they are all legendary creatures. 65 cards in all. Only 17 of them, though, are new to Arena. So my best advice is to know what you have and know what you want. And for instance, when you're drafting, draft accordingly to your shopping list, because getting a 5th copy of this, or if you're a Brawl player, even getting a 2nd copy is not necessarily useful. There is a pretty decent mix. There's 20 uncommons, 15 mythics, and by doing the math, that means there should be 30 rares. These are going to be represented as a dedicated spot in both packs that you buy from the store, as well as packs that you open for limited events. And just as a heads up, Ragavan Nimble Pilferer, as seen here on the screen, appears to have been preemptively banned for Historic. These cards in all are not playable in Explorer, they're not playable in Standard, they're not playable in Alchemy, and all but Ragavan should be playable in Historic. All right, so now I'd like to spend a few minutes briefly going over the mechanics of the new set, and of course the mechanic that is ultimately going to define the success or failure of this set is the new battle card type. And in fact, this is so new, it's so important, and well, frankly, it's so hard to nail down. I did a completely separate video on this. It actually posted yesterday if you're watching this in real time, and talked about the battles and how to evaluate those, as well as some really cool background information on some of the lesser known planes that kind of get name dropped throughout this set. So go check that out. And let's back up just a second, because backup is actually the mechanic that I think is going to be most budget relevant. The ability for a creature to enter the battlefield and either give itself a +1/+1 counter or put that counter on something else and share its abilities with it until end of turn could be very, very powerful. And while it remains to be seen and may be somewhat doubtful that a dedicated backup deck is really going to be a budget impact in standard, almost certainly the +1/+1 counter deck is going to be a thing for about the next year and a half. And there's no reason to think that the backup cards will not be a significant part of that. So I think this is one of those areas we definitely need to keep our eye on. The dedicated red-white deck, as well as the more generalized green-white +1/+1 counter deck. I believe the leading possibility of a sleeper mechanic is going to be transform. Of course, we're all pretty familiar with transforming double-faced cards at this point. This set not only has creatures that transform, and of course all the battles transform, but the blue-green archetype for this limited environment is basically transforms matters. There's going to be a number of creatures and things like that that actually care about the number of transformed permanents you control. And while I think this might actually be one of the more powerful things in the limited environment, I'm not sure how well it's going to shake out in standard. Of course, there's a lot of stuff that transforms already in standard, from the sagas and Kamigawa, all the way up through, of course, all the transforming things that are brought in this environment. And there's no reason to think that we won't see more transforming cards over the next year and a half before this rotates out of standard. I'm just not sure that there's going to be anything good here. Of course, all it really takes is a couple of good uncommons to make something like this go over the top. We'll have to see. But of course, one of the most prevalent transforming things in this set itself are the Incubator Tokens. And this is kind of a new thing. An Incubator Token has a number associated with it, and it gets that many +1/+1 counters. At some point in the future, you can pay 2 mana and flip that Incubator Token over into a 0/0 Phyrexian that immediately gets all of those previously mentioned +1/+1 counters. But of course, it also counts as a transformed permanent. So it kind of pulls double duty here. These are all over this set. How much impact these are going to have on standard, I think, is going to have more to do with the transform mechanical deck archetype that we just talked about. Although I'm sure one or two of these cards that mentioned Incubator could very easily impact standard outside of the larger mechanic. And the last mechanic that we're going to talk about here is Convoke, which the shorthand for that is you can tap creatures instead of lands to produce mana of whatever color that creature is. Basically, you end up with a lot of overcosted spells and permanents. They start out overcosted because Convoke could make them super, super cheap. For this reason, Convoke tends to have more impact on the limited environment than it does on constructed. But again, this is one of those areas where all it takes is one or two of these cards to find homes in a deck to make them relevant. But I'm not sure that we're going to see a Convoke mechanic deck in standard anytime soon. Convoke also has the secondary impact that a lot of the token creatures in this set are by their nature 2 colors to allow for more Convoke ability options. All right, so this next topic is more or less for the folks that have been around the channel here for a little while. What you see here are 3 tribally themed parts of the new player experience. And back at the beginning of the year when these were first introduced, I really criticized these on the fact that in the case of Ninja and Samurai in particular, They weren't really super playable as they were, and it was very unlikely that we were going to get additional cards to bolster these tribal themes because ninjas and samurais and citizens are all very set specific. Additionally, all of these have received support through alchemy, either through rebalancing or access to additional cards, and they still were not coming together good enough to really be playable, even from a budget constraint. It was pretty hard to get anything that was a consistent 55% win rate or higher. But for the sake of completeness, I do want to point out that each and every one of these tribes got at least one card's worth of support from the current March of the Machine set. And actually, Samurai got two, but the other one is an off-color black card that doesn't really help Boros Samurai because the last thing it wants to do is try and splash a third color. But anyway, unfortunately, these really don't do a whole lot for the archetypes in question. I still, even in alchemy, I don't think this is quite enough to push these into playable. Although the ninja, that is in essence a protection spell with combination of the backup and ninjutsu and repeatability, could hold some promise and is probably worth looking at. But to be fair, I'm not holding my breath. And now let's talk about some MoM budgeting. And not a whole lot is really different for this set. We're still expecting to get somewhere in the neighborhood of 85,000 gold. I think 7 jump in and a total of 6 drafts should get you to that roughly 100% of the commons and uncommons. Still leave you plenty of room to purchase about 47 packs or so, 2 of which are at a discount, and then that also gives you enough gold to buy that 45 pack, bundle pack, and get the extra rare out of it. We don't know what that rare is just yet. And that should leave you somewhere in the neighborhood of about 5,000 gold to either buy more packs, bank for the next set, or maybe do an additional draft if you're having a hard time hitting that Mastery Pass level. But there are definitely some things to think about from a budget perspective when it comes to this set that are going to be a little bit different. One is rotation is coming around next fall, and that means the introduction of the 2024 New Player Experience starter decks. And with those, you will receive free copies of any cards that you don't already own. So by not adding cards to your collection in the short term, you will ultimately get those back then. And then when you do the things that you would normally do to add cards to your collection, cards that you already have will contribute towards the vault and give you more wild cards in the long run. And I know that is a bigger thing or a smaller thing depending upon where you are in your arena experience, but it is definitely something to keep in mind. The other item that is coming up with anticipation of that fall release is the reset to the jump-in pool, and last year they did this during the summer set. So when Lord of the Rings comes out, your jump-in pool is going to change, and all of those packs that are based on things that are getting ready to rotate will go ahead and be removed from the pool. The idea here is that once that happens, every single time you do jump in, your odds have gone up a little bit of getting what you're really after because of the smaller number of choices. This is the final set of the standard year, so that jump-in pool is as big as it's ever going to be. We expect 10 jump-in packs to be added, and that's going to put our pool at 80. The idea is that when they reset it, they're going to reset it back down to 40, and probably 30 or so of those are going to be standard inspired, and about 10 of those are going to be alchemy inspired. Another thing that we talked about very briefly there was that this is the last set of the year. So it is going to have the shortest window of standard legality, only about 16 months or so of being standard legal. It is also competing with 7 other sets in order to be relevant. So the question really becomes, how much do you need this set? And I'm not saying you don't, that answer is going to be different for everyone. But there is a good possibility that this set has a lower utility than any other set that we talk about during the course of the year. The bottom line here is I encourage you to be very conservative this time around in doing jump-ins and drafts. Adding cards to your collection later rather than sooner may be the correct answer. That having been said, there is a short-term goal that you definitely want to keep in mind. That is May 2nd through May 4th. You're going to have the March of the Machines constructed format for Midweek Magic, meaning you can only use cards for March of the Machine. What I am going to be doing is, again, being very conservative with those jump-ins and those drafts, and my goal is to only do enough to have a viable deck for that event by May 2nd. That means I might only do 2 or 3 of each, or maybe even a lesser combination if I get lucky. And remember, these Midweek Magic constructed only events, when you're restricted to one set, they don't have to be curb stomp perfect. You just need 60 cards that kind of synergize a little bit and give you an over 50% win rate. And just in case you didn't have enough to think about when it comes to the March of the Machine draft environment, keep in mind that we're heading into the summer months, and the summer set is known to be Lord of the Rings. That is going to be an alchemy set, not standard legal, and that's going to mean different things for different people. But for everyone, that might very well mean that your MoM draft funds are going to need to cover your rank draft for April, May, June, and July. When it comes to August, we know Lord of the Rings is going to be a draft environment, and we're going to have access to 2 other quick draft environments aside from Lord of the Rings. We don't know yet what those are going to be or have a recommendation on exactly which one might be better for you, but just know, again, you want to be conservative with those draft funds because they are going to need to do a little bit more for you in the coming months. And let's not forget about Aftermath. We know that this is going to be coming to us in May. I believe it's May 11th, if memory serves. We know that this is going to be a mini set with 50 standard legal cards. And we know that in the real world, for paper Magic, these are going to be distributed as 5-card mini packs. We do not, however, have any idea how this is going to be distributed on Arena. We just know that it is coming to Arena. We don't know if that's going to be packs or some kind of for purchase bundle. We don't know. But we do definitely want to make sure that we have the funds and a plan to respond to this as we know more. And of course, we will continue to talk about that over the next month as more information becomes available. And I will be doing a full budget perspective on the set, like I always do, right before the set drops. And folks, before you go, make sure you've subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out on a thing. Because I know I can't change the Magic economy all by myself, but I think we can.